Hello again. Welcome back to OASP AppSec Days India edition. Thank you for joining this virtual edition. I am your host, Karan Shah. And the next speaker that we have in line is Hotanya Ragtah. Hey, Hotanya.
Hey, Karan, how are you?
I'm good. A little introduction about Hotanya. Hotanya is an experienced cybersecurity professional with over 7 years of experience in the industry. And he currently works with Kiwi Bank as an information security consultant. And I'm gonna pass the stage to Hotanya now. Here's the screen.
All right. Thank you very much, Karan. Thank you, OWASP Foundation, for having me. Very excited to be presenting here. So, hello, everyone. As Karan mentioned, my name is Hotanya Ragtah, and today I will be talking about something called the attacker's mindset. Thinking like an attacker, and how we can use that to get some quick wins for securing our application. So the goal of this session is to highlight some practical and quick wins, steps that we can use to get the best return for the time invested in securing the application by using a thing called the attacker's mindset. So I am an information security consultant currently working at Kiwi Bank, a bank in New Zealand, and I help embed cybersecurity into internal projects that we do, try and build more secure products for our customers. I'm an ex-pen tester. I worked as a pen tester for the last 5 years, so I know the ins and out of offensive security. I used to do a lot of mobile testing, application testing, and this talk is basically a collection of some of the stuff that I would look for in applications while testing, and on the flip side, how we can use that mindset, the attacker's mindset, what an actual hacker would look to try and attack your application, how we can use that to help secure it. And I've been in the security industry for 7 years now. This is just a collection of my experience and observations that I've seen of what we can do to help secure applications a bit better. So first of all, why even this talk? Why do we need to talk about the attacker's mindset, right? But to understand the gaps in our defenses, we need to first step into the shoes of those that are trying to break those defenses. Attackers can have a range of motivations, from financial gain to political motives to simply just the thrill of testing their skills. It's a fun challenge. By understanding these motivations, we can also better anticipate their motivations. At a basic level, it's all about the attacker's mindset is about being inquisitive. What would happen if I do this? How does this work? What does this thing do? These are just some of the things that we might have not thought of while building the application. We think about building it, but not about not necessarily how we could break it. Because as developers, we build things to work in a certain way. An attacker would instead of using it as it's supposed to be used, an attacker would try and use those things in unexpected ways. For example, if you take a typical banking application, you log in, you can view your balance, send money to other people, etc., etc. That's what a normal user would do. They would log in, you need to send money to a friend. Cool, here you go, done. What would an attacker do? So you go, same thing, you log in, but instead of like, hey, I need to send $5 to this person, I would be like, what if I send negative $5? What would happen? If the application isn't expecting it, isn't checking for it, potentially I could gain more money than I had. If I try and send someone $5, the calculation would become whatever your balance is, $5 that you're trying to send minus, and then I'm trying to send negative $5 minus $5, resulting in positive $10. Quick meme of how it's normally done, like use app normally. Nah, how can I break this? It's all about what's in front of you. How can I use it? How can I break it? And another part of the mindset, it's finding the low-hanging fruit, or in New Zealand, as we say, the low-hanging kiwi fruit. Attackers love to score quick wins as well, right? So it makes sense that they would rather go for an easier target as opposed to something that's a lot harder. Think about it. If someone were to rob a house, would they go for the big castle with armored guard outside, or small little cottage down the side with less low to no security, the low hanging fruit? What does the low hanging fruit look like? Well, these are some of the things that can be an indicator that you might be the low hanging fruit. Outdated software. Probably the biggest one there is outdated software. It may contain vulnerabilities that an attacker can exploit. It can also be a sign that the company is lax on security, like maybe they don't have the budget, they don't have enough resources, or they're not taking it seriously. This is easy enough to identify from an external perspective. There are bots and probes doing this constantly out on the internet, and it's very easy to automate, so very easy to find. Another thing is unnecessary services exposed. Again, like with outdated software, this is something that you can easily probe for. There's scans happening all the time, searching for things like open management ports, maybe your database port is open, additional default files on the web server, stuff like that. It just creates unnecessary a much bigger attack surface than needs to be. If it's not necessary for your application, maybe it shouldn't really be there. And here's a bit of a controversial one: outdated design. If your website or app looks like it was built in the 90s, you have old font, it's slow, not responsive, the user interface isn't bad, it might be it's sometimes an indicator that, hey, something juicy is there to be found. I know I've tested several applications where I've gone and taken one look and I'm like, okay, this thing is going to be filled with cross-site scripting, and usually it is. Like, seriously, if your website looks like this, it's likely that you might have put it together yourself, or you've gotten a friend or uncle's kid or someone who makes who does web design, and they've made it that way. It just gets more eyes on you and paints you as maybe a easy target. So how can we score some quick wins for this? Well, easy. Avoid One of the easiest ways is by avoiding being the low hanging fruit. So I'm a believer that being compromised is a matter of when, not if. So if you can divert an attacker's attention from you, then it's better. If it looks like it's you're too much effort, then they'll just move on to another one. Cyber criminals, and then they look for the easiest way. Like it's a job for them as well. So they would rather go for an easy target rather than spend more time, more effort on something that might not be worth it. Patching and updating. That's very simple and extremely effective. So any softwares or libraries that you use, updated when and where possible. Outdated software might contain vulnerabilities that attacker can leverage. According to a report by AutoMox in 2022, 60% of all data breaches were caused by unpatched vulnerabilities. Now, this figure could very well be a lot higher than that, and that was from 2022, and threats have increased since then. But just think about a lot of the high-profile cybersecurity incidents you might have heard over the last few years. WannaCry. That targeted old operating systems like Windows 7, Windows XP, Log4j, not using an outdated version of that. Like, it created havoc all across the world. Even Change Healthcare, they got ransomware earlier this year. Attackers got in through unpatched software. Securing inputs, that's a very easy way also to score some quick wins. It covers the OWASP top 10. Its injection is the second one in the OWASP top 10. So this covers all your cross-site scripting issues, SQL injection issues. A simple way of thinking about this is any user input, anything that's coming from the user to you, to your application, to your server, treat that as untrusted. If you treat all of that as untrusted, then you can validate it against a set of your own rules, but by the server that you know is good. So always treat user input as untrusted. Strengthen authentication and authorization controls, the ones that you have. Another big one. This is number one on the OWASP top 10, broken access control. Access control, authorization, authentication should be a top priority. It's part of the CIA triad: confidentiality and integrity of your users, of the data that they have. one simple tip is don't roll your own crypto. If you're using any sort of cryptography libraries, make sure they're established ones. You're using strong algorithms, especially with SSL and TLS. A lot of, if you're using AWS, it generally defaults to using TLS 1.0. If any of you have ever gotten a penetration test done, they will always bring this up. You're using TLS 1.0, 1.1. While they used to be good, a lot of these algorithms, MD5, SHA-1, they have been since deprecated and replaced with stronger alternatives. Those are the recommended ones, which less prone to collisions. They don't contain any vulnerabilities, and yeah, you should always use the strongest algorithm where possible. And always validate permissions on the server side. Don't rely on client-side controls. I've seen so many applications where you've got your standard users, they access it, and then you've got your admin side, but it's all in the same application. It's just hidden by some CSS. You can easily see that. Like, do not rely on client-side controls. Always validate it on the server side. And yeah, last but not least, like, think like an attacker. That's what we've been discussing. So look at things from the perspective of how can I break this? When you're building your application, build it, think about, yep, this is how it's going to be, so I'm going to build it this way. But also think about what would happen if someone decides to do something different. Are you doing any sort of error handling? Are you returning verbose error messages that might give an attacker more information that they need? So these are all things that you should think about. How can you apply this to your workflow? So if possible, like one of the best things to do, as I mentioned before, is think like an attacker. Threat modeling. So if you haven't done threat modeling before, it's a great way of coming up with a systemic approach on how you can identify the threats for your application, your network, whatever situation you're in. Come up with a network diagram of what your application should do, what it will be doing, how it interacts with other components, whether that's in the cloud, whether that's other systems. Map it all out. Once you've got a nice visual representation of it, then you can start thinking about, okay, at each stage, what threats exist? So if you keep doing this, you can do that for each component. Then you've got a nice big list of, cool, these are the possible threats. Then you can compare that with what do we already have in place that could mitigate against these. It helps you identify any gaps you might have. So if there's any other security components you need to add, any other things you need to do, you've got a good visual representation of it. Regular patching. Again, it's an easy quick win. So if patching can be hard, we've got outdated systems, and it's hard to like get outside of your regular work to go and do patching and maintain systems. If you can automate this, it's the best thing. Maybe say it's as simple as setting a calendar reminder once a week, once a month. Just do patching. Regularly go through the list of software components you have, the libraries that you're using. Make sure you update them. Consider using automated tooling. There's so many tooling that you could use. You could integrate with things like OWASP Zap. There's a Burp Suite if you want to do penetration tests. GitHub Advanced Security if you're already using GitHub. It's easy enough to embed that in. Things like Sneak and all of that. See which one works for you, works for your company, your application. Embed it into your CI/CD pipeline. If you can automate a lot of the boring stuff, it just becomes second nature. So you write your code, you push the code, it automatically goes through the tests, checks for any vulnerabilities. Some of these tools even check for dependency issues. So if there's a dependency in a library that you're using, it can even tell you and alert you about any vulnerabilities that are in those. So automate all the boring stuff. If you're already doing all of these things, then fantastic. That's amazing. But if you can implement even one of the items that I spoke about, then you will be better off than you previously were. And you can always work your way up. Start with one, chip away as you can, because an attacker only needs one weakness. As defenders or as developers, we need to think about everything. So by continually testing it, training it, and thinking like an attacker, we can make it that much harder for them to succeed. And one thing that I haven't added here is, conduct regular penetration tests. So you might not know everything, so it's always a great idea to get someone in, an external auditor or a penetration tester, to just validate your security settings, get them to check go through it from an offensive perspective. Someone who's done it, they do it as a job, in and out. So they should be able to help you identify any other vulnerabilities that might exist, because new things always come up. So if one person might have missed something, it could either be picked up during a peer review, code review, or during a penetration test. So that's actually all I have for today. So thank you for joining the session. I hope you have found this useful. So yeah, continue to. I hope you've learned something about the attacker's mindset, and hope you can use this as part of your workflow, as a part of your daily job, and overall just help you in securing whatever applications you might be working on or you might come across. If you do have any questions, yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I'm relatively easy to find on the internet, on social media. Yeah, just reach out if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
All right. That was an awesome talk.
Hey, thank you.
I'm sure people will have questions and you will be able to answer them on the chat that comes over. Also, if everyone has questions, even post the recording ends, you can reach out to the speaker over the speaker's social media, and he'll be happy to answer. Right then, this brings us to the end of this talk. Thank you so much for joining this talk, and a big thanks to Google for sponsoring this event. See you all in the next session. Stay tuned.